Good afternoon. I am Dr. David Mahatha. I am the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Belonging, and Community Engagement at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And welcome to our Fireside Chat. I am very fortunate to have one of our wonderful students at UConn, Ms. Morgan Clark, with us today. Welcome, Morgan. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing just lovely. I'm very excited to be here and just kind of share what I can about my experience with the LSAT. So thank you.
Wonderful. We are happy to have you with us. So let's get started, if you don't mind.
Of course.
All right, great. So my first question for you today is to really just tell us a little about you. Let the audience know who you are.
Of course. So my name, like you mentioned, is Morgan Clark. I'm a 1L at the University of Connecticut School of Law. I am currently in my first semester of law school, so I've been kind of in this whirlwind, kind of trying to get acclimated, but I'm originally from New Jersey. I grew up there my entire life, and then I went to school in Boston. I went to Brandeis University, which I say is in Boston, but it's on the outskirts of Boston. So I graduated from there with a degree in public health and a minor in legal studies. And then I took a year off in between undergrad and law school. And I worked at a insurance company slash private equity company as a compliance analyst before I ventured back to Connecticut. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
There we go. Thank you. That was my fault that time. Well, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to have you at UConn. We're glad to have you with us. So my next question is, how did you prepare for the LSAT, and what became your kind of study regimen, including where you studied and how often you studied for it?
Of course. So I think it's important to preface that the test I took is different in structure from the test that is administered currently. So I
Right.
took the LSAT when there was still a logic game section. And then there's obviously the one alternative section that you don't know what it is going to be or how it's going to be scored or if that one's going to be scored. So it was the four breakdowns of the logical reasoning. My test was one logic games, two logical reasoning, and then one reading comprehension. So I initially started self-studying. I bought the Power Score booklets as well as the supplementary materials. And I studied during my senior year of college, so it wasn't necessarily the most focused studying I think I probably could have given myself. I am a chit chatter, so if I get in any sense distracted, I do not necessarily focus on what I should be doing. So I kind of realized I needed to pivot from self-studying to really having someone encourage me to lock in and be very focused. So the second time I took the LSAT, it was in my year off. So I think it was maybe like 5 months after my first time. And I got a tutor for that time. So I paid for a service and I invested the money. And I would say that that helped me just kind of keep on schedule and have some sort of format, a structured format. I ended up taking it 3 times. So the next time I took it was a couple months later in February. So I took it in November, I took it in April, and then I also took it in that February, was my last time. So a
Okay.
couple different avenues of studying that inherently helped me to get the score that I wanted to actually obtain to apply to law school with.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just want to kind of continue. You were talking about the service that you paid for.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little about that and how it benefited you?
Of course. So I went through, there's a couple obviously different types of services you can get. You can do one-on-one training, you can get group studying. I knew I needed to be solely with a tutor by myself in order to feel kind of the most prepared I could possibly be. So I researched a couple different options and I landed with Juris Education. And it was a package-based program. So I think I paid for something like 120 hours or something of that tune. And you could add hours on ad hoc as needed as well. And that was broken up over a span of 3 months. So in that time, it took me to take my second LSAT. And then the time I took a third one was when I used it to kind of really focus in on what areas I needed to best prepare for, what areas were my strong suits, which ones were the weakest. And I kind of used that as a guideline and just took a bunch of practice exams during that time as well.
Okay, cool, cool. You mentioned doing the power score.
Mhm.
So tell me about that. What was it like for you and how was it set up for you?
Yeah, of course. I think that the Power Score booklets and Kaplan and things like that, they're great for the first time you're taking the LSAT because for me, I'm a first generation law student. I had no idea the process of taking the LSAT. I had no idea what it constituted. I didn't know the material that was going to be on the exam. So for me, it was really helpful in getting acclimated to how I was going to take the LSAT or even just what the LSAT is. And I think that was very beneficial. Looking back on it, though, I think I devoted a lot of time to the Power Score booklets. Whereas I think for me personally, taking the exams with repetition and practice was a lot more helpful than focusing just on the content of the books. So I guess my suggestion would be use the booklets as a supplementary aid, use the booklets to get acclimated and to develop that knowledge of the LSAT, but definitely take as many tests as you can because the best way to practice a skill is to do it over and over again.
Good advice, good advice, good advice. So, with your busy life, because a lot was going on,
Yeah.
how did you balance life and studying for the LSAT?
Yeah, I was a busy, busy bee in that gap year. I was working two jobs and an internship and studying for the LSAT all at the same time. So I think the biggest thing was, oh my gosh, yeah, was just communicating with my bosses and communicating with the people that were I was reporting to directly because that was they broke out a lot of time to allow me to have to study. So I think the way I broke it down was I met with my tutor twice a week. I took two practice exams every single week. So I took one, we met Tuesday, Thursday. So I took one before our Thursday meeting and then I took one on Sunday. So we would review kind of that exam. If I had any questions based off of the assignments I was given, we would go over that information. So I roughly studied, not including the exams, I roughly studied for 4 hours a day. And then the exams would take me about 3 hours to finish and then review as well for about a half hour. So I would come home from work around 7 p.m. and then I would study for from 7 to 11, and the days I had to take my exam I would ask my boss if I could come in a little later and then I would just kind of do the work that I can fit in where I can. There were times, and I don't advise this, where if I had like an hour for work I would study, like in between my lunch break I would just like
Right.
study. So it's definitely a sacrifice, but I think that I was able to navigate it very well because I knew, okay, it's just going to be 5 more months. If you can get through the 5 months and understand that this is going to be a very large portion of your life, that's fine. Like I just counting down the days basically until it was over and I had to take the exam.
You did well. You organized it. You really,
Yes.
yes, and that's very important.
And you
Very,
have to, because if not, you get in this sense where you start to feel either burnt out or overwhelmed. And,
yeah,
unfortunately, life happens and things kind of are trying to deter you from your best study mechanisms. And unfortunately, just doesn't go always as planned. And keeping some sort of structure definitely helps that, even in instances where, you can't get work off, or maybe you have to unfortunately drive your parent somewhere or things like that that take time out of your
right.
day, you can still stay on schedule and still make sure you get done what you need to.
Very, very good, very good, very good. So the next question ask is, what section of the LSAT was most difficult for you, and how did you overcome that difficulty? And please forgive the noise, the background noise. I have fire trucks around.
No problem. I think that the hardest section for me was the reading comprehension section, which is ironic because it's like that's what I've been doing most of my life. All the standardized tests I take are reading comprehension applications. So it's like, why is this any different? Why am I struggling with this section? But I think why I struggled so much was because of the time implementation of it. So how are you going to read passages very quickly and then understand them and then apply them to 8 questions and then move on to another passage? So I really, really started timing myself a lot. I would read anything I could. So like I think I downloaded like Bloomberg, I downloaded like very heavy dense material because I was like, okay, this is what the LSAT's going to be on. It's not going to be on some fun fiction material that I'm having a great time enjoying. So download a lot of the material, then just time myself. How fast can I get through these passages? Did I really retain what I read? And can I now broaden and answer questions that pertain to the material that I just read? So finding time where I could before work, I would just get up and read the news and then time myself on how fast I could read this article. So just many little kind of like almost games to make things feel a little bit more fun, even though you're learning and you're studying, were very helpful to me.
Cool, cool. I know people like me, I am not the fastest reader.
I'm not either.
So
So we're on the same boat here.
so, what's some advice that you would just give, people who are like us, who just don't read that quickly?
Well, one, give yourself some grace because realistically, this is not meant to be easy. So you have to understand that it's going to take time for you to develop those skills to eventually become a fast reader. But the way you
Mm,
develop those skills is again with repetition. You have to constantly force yourself to engage in the material, to engage in the activity, because that is the only way you're going to be able to then implement it in not only a high pressure setting, but in a setting where it really matters. So I
mm.
think as much as you can, practice as much as you can, and then also just be understanding that everybody moves at their own pace. You're running your own race. So it's okay to not necessarily be as quick as you want, but understand that you're going to get there if you develop and invest the time to do that.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Of
I
course.
know you already talked about taking the LSAT multiple times.
Mhm.
Do you recommend that for people in general?
I am a big proponent of take it as many times as you need to feel comfortable. I do say that with caution though, because I do understand that there is a certain amount of times you can take it in a certain time span. And also that law schools do look at the amount of times you take the exam itself. So my second exam was kind of unfortunate because my Wi-Fi cut out midway through my exam. So I lost a chunk of my reading section. Yeah, I lost 5 minutes of my reading section. Yeah, it was really bad. I was like crying in the testing room and I couldn't get back on, so my computer died. It was like everything that could go wrong in that moment. But
Went wrong.
yeah, so I was like, okay, well, yeah, I'm gonna for sure have to take it again. And there are different things that you can like put stipulations in your applications that like I took it this many times because of this experience. And people that are reading your applications are very understanding, but they also want to see that development as well. So it's okay to take the LSAT multiple times. I think the one and done situations are very rare. And if you can accomplish that, that's great. But also I was big on I wanted to get into a very good school. I wanted to make sure that not only was I at a top tier program, but I was getting a lot of money off because I am not
Mhm.
where I can afford law school, or my parents were not paying for law school either. So I needed to make sure I got the score that would allow me to go to law school for very cheap and to also get me into a top tier program. So it was imperative that I took it multiple times.
So when do you advise students to take it for the first time, particularly if
Yeah,
they're in their senior year?
yeah, so I think it ranges for the person. I played soccer in college, so I was constantly always busy. And for me, it just made sense to take it my spring of my senior year because I knew that I didn't have time during my junior year to take it. But that also meant that I was not going to be able to apply and get in directly after I graduated. So I think it depends on your timeline for law school. If you're
Okay.
trying to go right after, I would advise that you take it at least the first time in October of your junior year, because that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to take the exam again if needed, and also to gather all the materials for your applications. That way you can have them submitted and done by their deadline in August. So it definitely does depend on what your goals are, what your timeline is, and then how feasible is it for you to accomplish all of these things while you're also in school or while you're
Right.
also busy if you have children, if you're working a full-time job. When can you arrange your schedule to sit down, study for an exam, and then also prepare yourself to start a very gruesome application process?
Cool. So explain kind of the process once you took it and
Mm.
that you got your scores and you were happy
Yeah.
and all of that. What was that process getting it to the law school and all of that?
Yeah, well, so the day I got my score back, I went out to dinner with my dad. Like I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna celebrate. We're gonna have fun. Like, thank goodness." But then also that same day, I already had my applications prepared because I was anticipating submitting my scores when I took it in November. So my applications were done, packed, and prepped in order to be submitted when I got my score back that February. So all I had to do was essentially click submit. What I do advise though is make your life as easy as possible. If you're taking your LSAT in that month that you're waiting for your exam scores to come back, Get all the
Mhm.
materials that you need to begin your applications already prepared. So that way, when you get your score and you're happy with it and it's a joyous moment, you can just hit submit, send, and then all the applications are done and you're ready to go and ready to just await the process of actually getting into schools.
That makes a lot of sense, a lot of sense. So my last question for you is, what piece of advice would you leave with students who are interested in law school? What should they do to prepare for that LSAT and all of that?
Um, that's a good question. I think I think my first thing, again, circling back, is just to give yourself a lot of grace. I think I'm a very high-strung person, and I can acknowledge that about myself. And I know that I'm also a very academically driven individual, so it was disheartening when the first LSAT didn't go the way I wanted, but also like keep pushing. If this is something that you really, really want to accomplish, like you'll buckle down and you'll figure out how to get there. And I think I needed to give myself, like I said, a lot more grace than I did because I am someone who's working multiple jobs, trying to study for my exam, and this one time it didn't go the way I wanted it to. So don't beat yourself up for things that are kind of out of your control if you do the best that you can. And then that kind of leads into my next bit of advice, that give yourself all of the opportunity to do well. So if that means maybe sacrificing time with your friends or sacrificing time with your parents, that is something that if you want this very, very badly, you inevitably have to do in order to get where you want to. Like, I would apologize to my dad because I'm like, I can't cook dinner tonight. I'm so sorry. I lived with him in between that gap year. And I was like, I'm so
Mhm.
sorry. I can't tonight. And it was really good to have a support system that was like, I understand that. Like, you're studying for your LSAT. But like these people who love you and who want you to succeed will be very understanding of the fact that you are going to be a busy person for this time period. And then you can have fun and celebrate afterwards. Get into law
There
school
you
and
go.
really crush it.
There you go. There you go. You have to set priorities, set it as a priority.
A
Yeah,
thousand.
cool. Cool. Wonderful, wonderful. Uh, Thank you for
Of
this
course.
wonderful interview. We have someone on the line. I just wanted to give them a moment if they wanted to ask a question.
Of course.
Don't know who it is. It's just 4752. Did you have a question for Morgan?
Oh, no, I'm just listening. Thank you, though.
Of course.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, Morgan, thank you very much.
No,
I
thank you so much.
appreciate this interview. You were wonderful and marvelous as I expected.
Thank you. Oh my God. And again, if anybody has any advice, like feel free to reach out to me. I am very available. And also, like, I'm trying to navigate this too. So, as much as I'm sure I could help you, you could probably also help me. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. And so our next fireside chat will be in the spring. So we will be sending emails out, and we will have some other students, and maybe even Morgan might come back and share some more information with us. But thank you again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.
Thank
Right?
you.
Bye
You as
bye.
well. Bye bye.